Hello, welcome to our Radical Enlightenment podcast. With me today, I'm so excited to speak with Annabel and Meshach of the Spooner State. They are intimacy alchemists and they have been together 20 years. They are going to teach us about the 1% love, that it is possible for lovers to have an endless supply of intimacy, connection, fun, adventure, and fulfillment, even against all odds. So using their proprietary method, the 1% Lovers Transformation Method, they empower couples to transform their relationships into sacred unions of the 1% love within 30 days. They have cultivated a profound and ever-evolving sacred union rooted in open communication and mutual growth. Their journey has led to love they affectionately term 1% love, a love adorned with all that I mentioned before, that endless supply of love, connection, intimacy, adventure, fun, and fulfillment together. So we want all the juicy details of how we can do this too. This sounds amazing. And my husband and I, we've also been together for over 20 years, and we're always, finding ourselves in old patterns and wanting to move beyond those things and experience deeper love. As I'm sure that so many of our listeners are finding themselves wanting to improve their relationships, or some, they're looking for the right person, but they want to make sure that they've gotten rid of all the emotional junk in the trunk and they're not doing their old pattern. They want to have the best relationship possible. So I'm sure the tools that you have will help those that are looking for a great relationship as well, so they know what they're looking for. So first, I love if you can just tell everybody what that, a little bit about your story and what the 1% love is.
Yes, Kelly, thank you so
thank
much
you
for
so
such a
much.
beautiful intro. Where do we start? As you already said, we've been together for 20 years. We've known each other for just over that time. We met when we were in our mid-teens, and we met through music. We're both musicians, we're both recording artists, and we've been doing that ever since we were in our teens. And we met, and initially we didn't have a spark. We weren't together. We were completely platonic, just friends. And then a couple of years down the line, we got together through what we would call quite a, what would you call it? Quite a
hand of God
experience, if you will. And then we were on some sort of trajectory for a while, and then it started going upwards, and we got engaged, we got married, we had our first son, and everything seemed to be going well. And then we just had a major dip. And to fast forward to the point that we had our two sons when they were really young, there was a point at which we were in our front room. Our boys were upstairs asleep. They had just fallen asleep. Annabelle had just been away on tour singing. And it was just a real terrible, terrible time where we had been like passing ships, where we were past the point of masking our distaste for each other. We loved each other, but we didn't really like each other that much. We weren't really attracted to each other anymore. And it really felt like, this is breaking point. We're done. I started having flash forwards of what it would look like to be a co-parent. Annabelle was my best friend, but we just couldn't see eye to eye and didn't know how to make it work at the time.
Yeah, it was awful. Again, back and forth, passing ships, going around in circles, wanting to save our marriage, just not having any tools as to how. And, in between housing as well, which didn't help. All the things that, the outside influences that couldn't help did. And yeah, we basically couldn't see eye to eye at all. And then we got to a breaking point where it was like, okay, we're either going to stay together or we're going to go our separate ways. And I remember at that point where it was just before we were going to break up, I just had to stop and go, do I love him? And the answer was yes. And because the answer was yes, we had to make sure that we were going to have tools to get us away to something else, something new, something fresh, other than what we were in. So that in our, first decade was the beginning of something brand new.
Yeah. And it just before we close out this explanation of a brief history, we started to discover at that point, there's something about putting yourself in an uncomfortable position and really being committed to the breakdown that leads to the breakthrough. And we found that a breakthrough started to occur when we just sat with and danced with the breakdown. We started to discover loads of what we now call sacred union secrets, which have enabled us to consistently take our relationship to new heights. So
yeah, in life, so much we go through that circle. There's a creation, there's a stabilization, there's a dissolution, and then there's space in between. And then there's that new cycle of growth. So it sounds like you guys, most people would bail, and you guys were in that space. It can be uncomfortable with some deep soul searching to figure things out. And then how did you gather the tools that then you turned into this philosophy that now you're helping others with? What did you guys do to figure it out?
Well, first of all, we sat in a lot of uncomfortability. We sat in uncomfortability, and we decided to allow that uncomfortability to guide us towards what would work. So it came down to a pure practical level, because we'd run out of love, and now it was about the work. So, okay, the way we were communicating, for example, did that work? What now? Because, you know, the love that had carried us for the first 10 years, did we have to hold us? What was our foundation? So we started there. In our new foundation for our sacred union, what's in it? What are the values and desires that are important to you and me? How are we going to communicate? So we basically began to build our house, as it were, on bricks instead of sand. And the sacred union secrets were having foresight, making sure that the way we view each other as lovers was conducive for the way we were going to communicate and the way we were going to build, making sure we had a vision for what we were going to do, making sure the vehicle in which we got to the vision was, you know, something that was sustainable to hold us, making sure that we put things in, like if we got into disagreements. And so we made sure we could respect each other's space and time to grow. So that would stop us falling into these habits again. And we narrowed it down to 8, because those are the 8 things that were missing, which were the foundation, the foresight, all sorts of things like that that we needed. We basically poured into our foundation.
How did you even know what was missing? How do you even get to that point? Because sometimes you just know you're uncomfortable or resentful or you're pissed off and you're not getting along. But how do you know specifically what's missing?
Something major occurred for me. It was like a revelation from heaven, if you will. And it was this. It was a real paradigm shift for me. I had multiple paradigm shifts during that period of breakdown, but this was a particular one that stood out to me. And it was this. It was like an audible voice, as it were. It was this: Annabel does not belong to you.
Wow.
And when I heard that reverberate within me, everything, my entire lens changed. And I started to see, first and foremost, Annabel, in not belonging to me, doesn't need to be with me. She's not obligated in any way to stay in this relationship. She is choosing to stay with me in this relationship. And that was so profound for me, because first and foremost, in the context that she's not obligated, but she's choosing, it actually demonstrates how profound our love and connection are. Because she's not got shackles on her hands and feet. She's not being told, no, you need to do this, you need to do that. No, she sees something in me which is so worthwhile and so valuable that she's committed herself to me. And in spite of the ups and downs, the turbulences, the tests, she's here. And what that started to demonstrate to me is that she is so valuable to me in light of that. She has, let me just think of the best way to articulate it. I can now appreciate her more.
Right. Yeah. I remember when Meshach shared that with me, the light bulb went off. I thought, oh my gosh, she doesn't need to be with me either. So it became about I choose, and I choose to build. And I choose to build on this notion that we don't have to be together. We choose to be together, and we don't own each other. And then this freedom opened up. Yeah. And in that same space, we learned how to be good recipients of each other. So when Meshach was sharing some, you know, truths, and I was sharing, it was the listening of each other. Now, because our scope had opened up, it was about, okay, I'm being a good steward and recipient of this information. And what happens if, instead of receiving this information, of screaming and crying, I sit and I listen and I believe what's being said to me? So yeah, there was that.
There was that. Wow. And then the final thing I want to say before I give you an opportunity to share your thoughts, Kelly, is when in the context of me seeing that Annabel doesn't belong to me and I don't belong to her, I started to see that I want what's best for her. I want Annabel to be happy. As a living soul to a living soul, I want her to be happy. And I don't want her happiness to be solely contingent upon me.
Yeah.
If I'm committed to her happiness, then I should be happy no matter where she draws her happiness from. And that really enabled me to just be in the discomfort of what it might look like for Annabel to have another source of happiness other than myself.
Yeah.
And that really enabled me to appreciate how autonomous and how self-governing this woman is, and how she has the authority to do what she wants, where and when she wants, but she chooses, in the context of our commitment, she chooses to honor me. And it just gave me such a profound level of appreciation for her.
And that day we became committed to each other's personal growth.
Wow.
That was born out of that. We were really still to see what was coming in.
Yeah.
And that helped us build these sacred union secrets. We thought, what's here right now that we haven't recognized before? And it was being committed to each other's personal growth.
I think, I agree 100% with what you're saying, because it's such an inside job to figure out what we need to do to feel inner freedom and to go in the direction that lights us up individually, that can be complementary to our partner, but is definitely an inside job. Where I think people get stuck, though, is they'll say, well, I'm committed by the marriage oath, as many people are. We agreed in front of everybody or our families or under God that we will make this commitment. And there are some entanglements there where they get stuck. And then they feel like, well, even if I'm miserable, I can't just leave. So I'm just going to stay miserable. But ultimately, I mean, we do have that option. So like, how do we get beyond that thinking where they're like, well, I agreed to my family and God, and I made a commitment in front of everybody. I have to stay. I don't have a choice. What would you say to that?
Great question.
It's a fantastic question. I think it's important to keep going back. And you mentioned it, Kelly, about the self-work. It's really about going back and seeing what truly makes you happy and the sort of person that you need to be in order to have that.
Yeah.
Sharing that with your lover and really holding continuous space. We talk a lot in 1% Love about practicing. So it's practicing the holding of that space, the consolidating. This is what actually makes me happy. And you almost have to phase out all of the noise, because what is under God and all of our family and friends, it's us in the driver's seat. No one's doing it for us. When we're screaming at each other behind closed doors or misreading each other, it's just us. So that whole outside influence it has to get stripped away, and it has to go back to what makes me happy? Who do I have to be? And how can I hold space for my lover to continue to be that person? And how do we meet in the middle? And then becomes the fun in finding what that is. You find the joy in the play of finding how to do that, because now you have a destination. Right. This is what makes me happy. In order to be this person, I have to be this way. Can you hold me accountable for that? What makes you happy? We have the same conversation, and then we meet in the middle. And
so it sounds like you two really had like a state of the nation where you sat down and you were just like, this is what's missing. This is what we need to do to fill it up. This is how we need to support each other. And we're going to make communication rules of how we honor each other when we speak to one another. So that's amazing that you guys had just figured out to do that, like
now, because I think the beautiful thing is, because we got to the point where it was like, we can just walk away from this now.
Yeah.
There was nothing to lose and also everything to gain. Yeah. And we gained a brand new perspective.
Wow. So what is the 1%? What does that mean?
In simple terms, 1% love is the type of love that people look at in a couple, for instance, and say, how are they so in love? How are they so connected? How are they so in tune? What do you mean they've been together for so long? What have they done to do that? What do I need to do with my lover in order to obtain such loving characteristics, as it were.
Yeah.
That's what it is in simple terms. What does it take to get that? That is really the question, right?
Yeah.
What does it take to experience such a love? In simple terms, first and foremost, what it takes is commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And that commitment is commitment to self-work, commitment to showing up as your best and highest self every single day. Even when you falter, even when you fall, you get back up and you say, no, I'm going to be the best version of myself. And then also a commitment to your lover, mirroring that if they profess to be committed to such. Because if they're not committed to self-work, then there's a conflict there. There's not reciprocity there.
Yeah. And I think also it is doing what we've seen through any athlete in the world, any politician that does really well, they are willing to do what the 99% of people don't do. Mm-hmm. And that is when it gets hard, they push through. You know, they dig deep, they go wide, they go high. And what we have seen is that it's so easy. And we've seen a lot of people just go, oh, it's just not working. It's not working. We're constantly trying to reframe. See, like, how do we get out of this? And it's not a glossing over of, oh, you know, we love each other so much. It's like, how do we look at this another way? What else can we do now that we haven't seen? And we're open to something that is unfamiliar to us, being the breakthrough. Yeah. So that's what it is. We're doing what 99% of people are not doing. And that belongs to 1%. And that's where the name came from.
So how do people make a breakthrough that can mirror some of the things that you have done?
I think there are a plethora of ways in which you can quote unquote attack this. Mm-hmm. I would say first and foremost, being open-minded. Yeah. Having a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. If you've got this fixed mindset and you're closed off to possibility, you may as well call it quits now. Or simply be willing to stay in somewhat of a tokenistic relationship, somewhat of a mundane relationship that goes around in this vicious cycle. It may not even be a passion-fueled relationship where sparks are flying, anger, disagreements. It may not even be that. It may just be completely mundane and boring. Mm-hmm. And you first and foremost have to be growth mindset based or open-minded. I would say that that's really where it begins, because it's only having that growth mindset that enables one to see what's possible on the other side of doing the work.
Yeah. And then the other thing is just to be willing. So the open-mindedness and the willing, it's like, okay, with my open mind, and I'm open to seeing things in a way that I've never been before, I have to now be willing to implement what is coming up. I have to be willing to build a foundation. I have to be willing to hold myself accountable, to build myself up and share myself with my lover and vice versa. So it's the open-mindedness and the willing, because again, it isn't a walk in the park. We've had to cry through this to get here, you know, 20 years later. Yeah. So
that's so true, because my background's in marriage and family therapy. And often when couples would get to the point where they're seeing someone like me, one of them has already checked out. Yep. And really they're looking at it because they want to get the therapist's collusion. Is it okay that basically that I can leave you? Usually, like they want you to be on their side so that they can say, see, I knew I was right. And then usually, you know, it falls apart. So to be willing to take personal accountability, even if you think it's the other person's fault, and to have the curiosity or to think like, how can we get to something different, rather than a closed mindset, like you need to change or this is over. That's never going to work. It has to have two people that are invested and both willing to look inside. Even if they're sending blame outward, they have to shoot those arrows inward, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not easy, is it? Nevertheless,
no, it's not.
Are you gonna play the victim everywhere in every area and point fingers at everyone else instead of looking inwardly and seeing, wait a minute, there's a pattern here. Yeah. Because ultimately the way these things show up in our relationships show up elsewhere in our lives.
Yes, true.
Patterns, they're blueprints which are psychological, which are running in the background, right? And if they don't show up in our relationship, they're showing up somewhere else. So we always are going to have to look in the mirror and say, wait a minute, what do I need to take ownership for?
And it is a lot of looking. It's a lot of looking and being okay with what you're seeing is what you're seeing. And like you said, even if it's, you know, the blame is on one side, there's always room to look at how we contribute to what's going on, because there are two people
Right.
in this.
100%.
And there's an energy that is being shared, whether 80%'s over here and 20%'s over there. We're
Yeah,
both in this. So how are we both contributing to what's currently in the space?
that's right. So what are some really specific things that couples could do to start laying a foundation, to start getting a different mindset, to start coming together intimately in a way that is different than before?
Well, the first sacred union secret, the first of 8, is foundation.
Mhm.
And by foundation, what we mean is identifying your values, your needs, your desires,
Okay.
and being clear on what you're committed to.
Yeah.
That is the springboard. Values, by values, what we mean in simple terms is things that are important to you.
Yeah. And it could be different person to person. So we have to agree that we're going to honor those differences, right?
100%, 100%. And I suppose there's a distinction between a value which is a deal breaker and a value which is a non-deal breaker.
Right.
Because that which is important to you may be something that you're willing to compromise on, but then there may be another thing that's important to you that is an absolute non-negotiable.
Yep.
And it takes going to this foundation laying level and saying, right, in practical terms, right, what are your values? And do a search online. What are values? What is it that people hold dear to them at a core level? All right, which one of these values is yours? Which one of these things do you find it just shows up as important to you wherever you go? That is something that you can identify as a core value.
Yes.
Am I willing to compromise on this, or are you willing to compromise on this? Absolutely not. Well,
Yeah.
if you're not willing to compromise on that value, and I want you to compromise on it, you're doomed before you begin. You have to really be clear on those core values. That's the first thing. And then as a byproduct, your needs and desires. What is it? And I want to say this before we continue, and before I continue explaining this, that these needs and desires particularly can change over time.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we always talk about is
The
seasons that and the cycles that we go through. We are not the same as 20 years ago when we first got together. We are completely different on many levels. Do the same core values still exist? Predominantly, yes, or primarily, yes, but we've changed so much. We have completely different needs now.
Yeah.
So we always seasonally have to go back to the drawing board and have a check-in.
Yeah.
How often would you recommend something like that, going back to that drawing board, like once a year?
I mean, if you want to look at it kind of like methodically, you could do it every quarter. But what you can feel within a relationship when there's a wind of change.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is saying, you know what, I'm not that person anymore. I'm actually this person. And it's celebrating that.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, with this person I am now, talk about, okay, what do they want? So because what can happen with lovers is you end up being in love with your lover from the last iOS, the last season. And you just, you're like, I don't know them. There's a stranger in my house. It's like, take this new person with you. And we say with every season of yourself, bring your lover with you. That's how we kind of cite it. And talk, because you can feel it's a little bit, you can feel that the reaction to certain things isn't the same.
Right.
And sometimes for yourself, you won't know. And it's like, oh, I actually don't. Like, talk to your lover and just, I used to like this. I really don't think I do anymore. I used to like this way we were. I really don't think it works. And there's workability versus what's wrong and right. In your sacred union, it's not about what's wrong and right. It's about what works. Does it work that you are a certain way now and you're not anymore? It's about what works for you, which is why it's a sacred union, because it belongs to you. What works for both of you is nothing to do with anyone else.
Correct. Now, what do you do if, let's say, one partner wants to have sex 7 times a week and one wants to have sex 1 time a week? And so you sit down and you lay out, this is a value for me, or this is what I want. Would they need to come to a compromise that's in the middle and they both need to agree to that? Or how would somebody overcome a discrepancy like that?
That's a perfect one. We had this. One of our love languages is physical touch, and the other one isn't. We had to really sit down and consolidate a middle ground. And the way we did that was to find a happy medium of, you know, how many times during the week there was going to be physical intimacy.
Yeah.
And then also couple it with, you know, the other lover, something that was important to them. If we're going to work together, can we go to, you know, another location to work X amount of times a week? So now we both got something. We got to play and find out, okay, well, you want this, that's too much. Let's meet in the middle. I'm happy to do this. And it really does take meeting in the middle. And also, whilst we're at it, this is important to me. Where can you meet me in the middle? And it becomes like a play. It becomes like a playful thing.
Yeah.
Because the lens is, I'm going to constantly find ways to see what's important to my lover. So it is about finding a middle ground. Some people say compromise. I just say finding, because it is a discovery.
Then I have clients where they agree on this compromise. They'll even put it in their schedule. And then if the other one doesn't do it, or they say, oh, well, the day got away with me, or I just got too tired, they'll make up an excuse. And then the other partner doesn't hold them accountable. And then the thing falls apart and doesn't happen. So what would you recommend to that? Like if one partner just kind of backs out of the deal and the other one isn't calling them out on it to say, hey, tonight's the night, right? You know? What do you recommend?
Well,
it's a great question.
It's a great question. So there's two things that we do. We've got something called bookending. And for the beginning and the end of the day, we have a mantra, which is, I love you and we're on the same team.
Yeah.
So consolidated in that mantra, and we call it bookending because essentially it's start at the end, it reminds us what we're committed to.
Yeah.
Other thing is, you know, and a saying that we have is, I'm practicing my sacred union. So if you miss it and maybe you call out your lover on it, when they're talking to you about how they feel and they've missed it, whilst they're talking, you practice letting them land.
Okay.
Because as we know in sacred union, sometimes when the lover's going off, you just want them, you cut them off because emotions can get the better of us.
Yeah.
It's you get to press reset and you get to practice. So it is okay. We've missed this target. And now I'm practicing my sacred union by listening to you. I'd like us to press reset. And you can press reset as many times as possible. 4 times, 7 times, get up, 8. It's that. And I think it's making it okay to reset.
Yeah.
Knowing that once you're practicing, because you've allowed yourself to reset, you almost like allow a buffer for it to go wrong or not to work.
Yeah. Would you do it that night or like the next day, the next morning? Like whenever.
I think, you know, there's nothing like the present. The next day is great because maybe you need, you know, we also talk about practicing a pause.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like, okay, let's start again tomorrow. Or maybe it's like, okay, let's give each other 5 minutes and then maybe let's find our way in. So it's, again, you set the terms, but it's having that reset and knowing that it is a practice. You're practicing the sacred union.
And in addition to that, I would say, with Annabelle citing our mantra, I love you and we're on the same team.
I like that.
Really have that front and center that you are on the same team,
right,
attempting to achieve the same target. And
yes,
if you have created this compromise of a target to have sex, know that if it doesn't happen, that is not an excuse to now turn on each other and act as if you're opposition. No, we're a team, right? Where as a team did we falter here?
Right.
Did we set the goal too high? Did we set the expectation too high?
Right.
Is it that the expectation we set was actually adequate, but we're not setting up other things in place elsewhere to ensure that we can honor that commitment? Is it the fact that actually, now that we've set up that expectation, on reflection, we don't really need that?
Yeah.
Actually, now that we've set it up as an expectation and we've demonstrated that we care enough to say, yep, I'm going to do that for you because I love you, maybe that's all that's required. Maybe we can then just go back to spontaneity because I see that you thought enough of me to consider my request. So there are many nuances, and it's about, this is where the self-work comes in. The more work we do on ourselves, the more intuitive we're going to become, the more patient we're going to become, the more unneedy we will be, the more self-fulfilled we'll be.
Correct.
And again, that thing of practice alleviates that whole thing from, you didn't do it, you didn't do it, it's a practice. When we watch a child, practicing and they fall over and they hurt themselves, we don't worry because we know that they're going to do it again until they get it right. And we need to allow ourselves that same grace in our sacred union. We're practicing this, and one day it's going to be easy, but right now it's a practice, and it's remembering the mantras and that we're practicing and what we're committed to, and that we're a team, and those things are all part of the foundation. And your sacred union is malleable because it's the both of you that are putting into it. It's so malleable. And I think when we get stuck to, you know, like I said, we get into the space of blame. It's like remembering, like, you know, if we're a team, we don't, you know, we give the constructive criticism, we consolidate, and we keep it moving.
Yeah. And I want to say one more thing. Sorry, Kelly.
No, go ahead.
It is, if it is still in my brain.
You've got it. It's there.
It will come back to me if it's important.
Maybe about being on the same team, or I just like that analogy. It's like, let's say it's a football team and the next day they're reviewing the tape and they're like, well, you know, this play didn't quite go right the way we had set it up. So we are on the same team. So what do we need to do to ensure that it can happen next time? Or do we need to recalibrate something so that it can? Right. Yeah. So there's a constant like coming together to figure it out, but it's not me against you. It's let's figure this out. Do we still want this goal? You know, do we need to get a sitter for the kids? Do we need to make sure that you're not so stressed out or working so hard that you have no energy left? So how can we support you in that? So it's like figuring out what's needed to continue to move forward, or reassessing and see, do we still want this? Right.
Absolutely. And it's just come back to what I was going to say is this.
Oh, great.
Being so mindful of the fact, and again, this comes with the self-work, but being so mindful of the fact that if you're having a breakdown in your relationship, that is the gateway to the breakthrough. So if there's a recurring breakdown, all right, we've got to now step back, take some time to be still as teammates or team members and thinking and look at this and say, wait, there's something going on here. There's a continuous cycle where we keep breaking down. There's a breakthrough here. We That's just huge. Need to work together to figure out what the breakthrough is, because on the other side of this is going to be an expansive world which will blow our minds.
Yeah, and we don't often, when we get stuck in our cycles, we can't see past. But you just got to, again, you've got to be open to considering your breakthrough is not what you think it is. You know, and with the recurring things that keep coming up, we use the analogy of a spider. How do you get rid of cobwebs? Do you clean the cobwebs or do you kill the spider? I'm sorry for any.
I know, I do take the spiders outside myself and shut.
Oh, me too.
I get Meshach to do it. But it is take the spider and relocate the spider, not kill the spider.
There you go.
and get rid of, and then no more cobwebs. So it's that, and sometimes the spiders in our life, we haven't stopped to look at where they are, and we're trying to continue with all the cobwebs, and it's like, where is the spider? The spider here is, we don't speak to each other nicely,
right?
You know, and it's like, okay, we need to now relocate that, and we look at things as opportunities, which is an opportunity to make this a learning moment. Okay, so instead of us being back and forth with each other, it's like, right, this is the opportunity to look at it differently. So let's do that right now. And we do that in real time.
So what do you do if you're taking the time, you have two people that are into it, they want to be open to possibility and be curious, and they find themselves stuck in a pattern. So you have two willing participants, but they just can't figure it out. They're like, we're always stuck in this pattern. We're doing the inner work. I just can't figure out a way out of this. Do you have any signposts or questions they could ask, or something that could help them see it in a different way? Because I think this is where people get stuck. This is where me and my husband get stuck, for sure, to speak personally. It's like, we're trying, we just can't figure it out, you know?
Yeah. No, did you have something to say?
I did. Yeah, I was going to say, so one of the things that you can do, which goes back to the spider analogy, is with the feeling that comes up based on whatever the subject is that keeps tripping you up, when was the first time you felt like that? I guess it's a version of emotional recall. Yeah. But you've got to look at that, because sometimes the thing that started that behavior, that pattern, started in a space that's nothing to do with your sacred union. Yeah. And you've just carried it with you, and it's sat in the back of your mind, and here it is showing up at the forefront of your sacred union. and it's sitting. Some of it is sitting and looking. I think, do you know what? The first time that happened, somebody spoke to me a certain way, and I felt like from that moment forward, I'd never allow anyone to disrespect me. So I'm short. And, you know, and when you look at, and it's such a relief when you find there's actually nothing to do with your sacred unit. It's something you've brought in, you know, and you've not even known. So it sometimes it's asking a lot of questions. When was the first time you felt that thing? So it's identifying, okay, the place we keep getting tripped up is when, I don't know, when we've got our friends around, or when we're talking about money, or when we're talking about sex. When was the first time, what am I feeling? I feel tight and frustrated and it makes me feel angry. When's the first time I felt that? And it's being a good recipient and sitting with your lover through that thing. And then knowing where it shows up. Oh, actually, this shows up when you speak to me a certain way, or we go to a certain place. And it's now looking at, okay, now that we know that, how can we reframe this so it doesn't trip us up? How can we reframe this so it doesn't stunt our growth? What can we do now with this? How can we play and remodel and this thing? So it's that it's finding the first place. It's what's it called? Not walking backwards. Reverse engineering.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So how do you reframe?
You reframe going, okay, I like to think of it as you look at the thing, you've allocated it, and you say, okay, thank you, I see you, I don't need you anymore in this space. I actually no longer require your services. And in this, you've got to talk to it and then say, in place of this thing now, I would like to transmute this thing into this. I like to transmute this thing into power instead of maybe cowardice, instead of maybe sadness. And I'd like to do that in this area by, you know, being open to power. And you practice that.
Yeah.
And you practice keeping that energy in the space through your words. I'm going to choose, instead of this sadness, instead of this smallness, instead of this contention, I'm practicing this being a powerful moment. And you keep saying it, you keep practicing it. It might feel awkward, it might feel silly at first, but you practice it. And because you've got your lover now on side in your team, it's like, okay, this thing's coming up again. I'm feeling this thing. I'm letting you know I'm feeling this thing in real time. And I'd like to replace it with power. And it's having that vulnerable kind of like moment here.
And your partner might see it before you do, because if you're in a triggered reaction, you're not really there anymore. So it might take the space holder of your partner to go, I think that thing is happening right now. You know, once you've identified what that is. This is resonating so much with me. We do this process. My husband and I are subconscious change facilitators. And there's one where you look at the inner critic or the inner protector. And usually that's protecting you from whoever was your most vigorous critic in your life, so that you start talking to yourself a little bit more strict than that, so you can keep yourself safe. So we go back in time and see what part of you is that protecting. And if we know that that critic or that protector part is trying to help, and we go back into that place and give that, it's usually a child part, what it needs. Like maybe you just need to be witnessed. Maybe you need to be heard. Maybe I need to speak up for you in a way that you couldn't when you were little. And then we go back to that critic or that protector and change our relationship to it. If you didn't have to work so hard to do that, then what would you like to do instead? So some people will say, well, I'd rather be that part of me be my social organizer or my biggest cheerleader or something. There's also this other process we do called a stress transformation, where you take some harmful thing and you transform it into your desired outcome. So it could be like peaceful, non-attached, letting go, feeling secure, moving on, forgiving, and moving people into that transformative place by choice. So this is totally like hitting all those bells for me, where it's like, yes, 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 yes. So you're doing that in real time. You're like, that reminds me of this time where I needed that to protect myself and I don't want that anymore. So now I'm going to call in my personal power, my empowerment, my self-confidence, so that I don't have to feel that you're walking all over me, because you're not. So I can reclaim that lost part And then that can transform the entire relationship. I love this application.
Well, that's so powerful what you shared, and I love. We just love that. It's amazing, and the byproduct of all of that is taking your past out of your future.
Yeah.
You know, what we say to some of our clients is we're creating a new line. You get to a new line of thinking, a new line of doing things, and you're the person that started it.
Yeah.
You get to be the author of that, and it's such an empowering thing that you've done within your sacred union. So what you said is just delicious,
and what you're doing is amazing work.
Wonderful.
What I wanted to say in addition that came to mind just prior to your explanation, Kelly, is this: one of the principles of habit formation is doing small things often, not doing big things in chunks and then leaving them for a while. So as it relates to practice, this is a daily applicable set of processes where you keep it simple, keep it as simple as possible. Remember, with the book ending, you are on the same team, keep that front and center, and do things in a simple way. Be patient with each other, show each other grace, show yourself grace, and just simply add a little extra every time. And that's gonna be there, like building blocks, aren't they? It's one block on the other until you get this edifice. So that's what I wanted to say in addition.
That's beautiful. So if we were going to give maybe one more tip or tool that people can take with them, what do you think is something else that would be a priority?
One of the other sacred union secrets is fun.
Yeah. People don't have enough of that these days. Everyone's all stressed out. We're just trying to survive, but so then that's all it becomes about, you know?
Literally
in survival mode, and that becomes a vicious cycle. So by fun, we define that as injecting playfulness and novelty into your relationship. Especially if you've been together for quite some time, the novelty wears off. The playfulness goes out of the window, and the responsibilities of life become the priority. And then you forget how you got started. The energy in the beginning was excitement, high vibration, resonance, playfulness. And what we always say is this: if you are the 2.0 version of yourself now, that you literally are the person that you wanted to become 10, 15 years ago, how is it possible that you are in a lesser state in your relationship? Now, we know why that is. It's because the novelty wears off. We know about the psychological effects of familiarity and all these other things.
Wounds and hurts, and we build up those resentments, right?
Right, absolutely. But on the flip side of that, because there's always polarity, right? There's always another side to the coin. We are so much more substantial now as beings. We actually have the ability to dwarf what we experienced in our early years in our relationship by the application.
And the other thing that is really important, ask each other questions.
Yes, in the realm of playfulness, in the realm of fun.
You know, you can ask them, you know, if you had no idea where to start, who was your best friend when you were younger? What made you happy? You know, who's the first person that you kissed? And you work forward. You know, today it was like, you know, what's something that if I did today that would really make you smile or turn you on or excite you? Asking your lover questions, because with all these seasons that we have in ourselves, because we're not linear, we change. So asking those questions really reveals a lot to us, the person that's asking the question, and the recipient of the question. Asking questions is so important. And then another thing I'd say to all the lovers out there is to apologize quickly and thoughtfully.
That was a question I have. So I wanted to ask, you know, like how do we move through that resentment or the anger? You've been in a fight and you want to heal from that. So I'd love to spend a little bit addressing that.
Yes. So what we have done, and we touched on it earlier, probably prematurely, was we always say safety words are not just for sex. So if we're getting into a heated discussion, we have a really odd word, as you would, that takes you out. If it's getting, you know, to the realms where it's just getting disrespectful, or we know we know our lover, you know, do we share our word?
You can share our word.
So ours is giraffe.
It's giraffe.
Yeah, because it's just so ridiculous. And, you know, you can imagine the tensions are high. It's like, you know what, babe, giraffe.
It'll break you out of it, just that word. Yeah.
And it giraffe, what's encompassed in giraffe is I can recognize within myself that I'm not in control. I recognize within yourself that you're going to be triggered, or, the emotions are high. So let's put a breath in.
Mm-hmm.
And giraffe also means that we take a breath and we have to come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're coming back to is not a bonfire. We're coming back to a gentle little candlelight that is malleable and that is workable. Mm-hmm. So there's also that. And then it's also bullet pointing what it is that we need, what it is that's upset us. There was a delicious moment where we had a disagreement and we giraffed and we came and went away. And then Meshach, do you see what, every single time? But you've got to make it as ridiculous as possible.
Yeah. And then it turned into a verb. That's what I like. We giraffe. And then I love that.
We both have to respect the giraffe. And that's the thing. And Meshach came back and he said, this is what came up that upset me.
Yeah.
This is what I think needs to be done, was it?
And prior to me giving the bullet points, I actually prefaced it by, I can't remember exactly what I said, but it would have been something like, I love you.
Oh.
We're on the same team.
Yes.
Right here, it has nothing to do with me pointing fingers or playing the blame game. Right. I just need to share what came up for me and why I think what took place doesn't work. It's X, it's Y, it's Z.
Yeah.
I've shared everything that I want to share, baby. Do you want to share with me?
And then also it makes, once we've done that, it allows you to see what the issue is, and it's not you versus each other. Yeah. It now becomes you versus the thing. This thing didn't work and it's getting between us. So it's about that. And then of course, if you're on the receiving end, it's about practicing being a good recipient. Right. My lover's talking now about what upset them, and I'm not going to interrupt them. Yeah, I'm practicing my sacred union, and it's that constant dialogue that's going on because your foundation, because of your sacred union, and it's practicing that, and and it's not, and it's we call catching the snowball before it becomes an avalanche. So
and what was so important too is, like, I think the thing that I miss in my relationship is, what do I need now? Because it's so much like, let's explain where it went wrong or how I feel. And I think like in my own relationship, we're really good about that, like the I messages and speaking with your personal experience, but we haven't taken it to the next step. What do I need now? And which gets you into the solution orientation. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of discussion.
Right.
That's huge.
Important. So important, because sometimes the solution isn't imminent. It's not there straight away. And I think it's also to acknowledge that, what do I need now? I don't know, but give me time. I'm going to come back. It's staying in that constant dialogue about that. It's staying in communication. And it is also asking, what is the solution here? And literally putting heads together.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, you might be able to come up with a solution together, even if I don't know the answer, then maybe we both can figure something out that would be a solution. So again, we're on the same team instead of you against me. So and that's so beautiful.
Quite often we as individuals are attempting to do everything in our own strength and attempting to solve all the problems and be the savior figure, when in fact when that becomes a mainstay in one's sacred union or one's relationship, that actually starts to divide, because you're now no longer vulnerable. You're now no longer connected. You no longer share with each other in the way that you could do or maybe did do. In fact, being in communication and sharing what the problems are and what the issues are and making two heads better than one is really the fundamental issue here. It's always going to be better when we're working together than when we're working separately, And
that takes a lot of framing in conversation. So often, Meshach or myself, I'm sharing something that's quite vulnerable, because sometimes we can miss it with our lover. They're actually being vulnerable, and we just think maybe they're being odd or too sensitive. Like there's times where Meshach's framed it for me, and I've gone, oh, okay. This is a vulnerable moment. Let me listen. Because especially when you get into the place where you allow your ego to enter, and you're like, we always say that moment where you could crush your lover.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
You practice, because it's so easy when your lover's right here, especially if you feel like they've done you wrong,
Right.
crush them. But because of the sacred union that will continue after the disagreement or the opportune moment, this is where intimacy is being built, and this is where we're meant to, we don't miss it. Your lover says, I'm going to share something and it's quite vulnerable for me to share this. You're literally, this is it. You're in the incubation of you building the intimacy. This is it. It's happening right now. And once we catch it, it's so beautiful. Yeah. Because then your lover has got space to flow, and you've got space to hold them, to hold space for them, to be there for them. So once you're going along and everything's fine again, you're now closer. You've built that intimacy, and that's where the alchemy happens.
Yes.
And on that note, if we can reframe our sacred union as a world of intimacy, as opposed to intimacy being a component of the world, that really helps, because then we're not compartmentalizing and saying, right, intimacy is here, intimacy is at that time of the day or this time of the day, and this action is what constitutes intimacy, as opposed to every moment with your lover is intimacy.
Every single one.
Wow.
If you're part of the same team.
That's a lot of pressure, but it's also very beautiful.
That's
really
why
beautiful.
Practice it. Yeah.
Yes.
Give yourself permission to practice.
Yes. How much time do you allow once giraffe has been called? Is it 10 minutes? Is it the next day? Do you just discuss when is a good time to come back together? Or
it's a great question.
We try not to let a day go by.
Yeah, it really does. It will depend on what we've got going on in the day. So for instance, if we have a giraffe moment and Annabelle has to go out and be somewhere, then the conversation will happen when she gets back, for instance. So it may be half an hour or two. But usually what happens is, if Annabelle goes out or I go out during the giraffe period, we will quite soon after send a text
message,
and say, I love you. We're on the same team. I'm not feeling great right now, but we are going to work it out. Something to that effect.
And that's what's so good with having the mantra, because, you know, especially depending on the intensity of the misunderstanding, the last thing you want to say is, I love you.
I know.
But you slide it in there. You just got to think of it. It's like, I've done it. Then you're not coming back to a burning house as it was. You've kind of like, you've put in your dove. Now you're coming back to, basically, I can see how, you know, you can start that awkward conversation and then hug it out. But it's getting that in. It's catching the snowball before it becomes an avalanche. And sometimes if you have to message that or voice note it, it's in the space. So it's utilizing all the things. It's not necessarily, you know, the last thing you want after a heated thing is, you know, to say, I love you so much right now, babe. It's not that. It is sometimes sending the message, I love you, we're on the same team, be right back.
And when we do come together again to have the conversation, usually it will look something like this. You ready to talk now? And usually it will be said with a slight smile, because we realize in the context of our life and our vision for our life, this is so small, it's so minute.
And you do have to kind of like forward think. It's like, is this going to be a big deal in a year? And if it isn't, great. And if it is, fine. Now we've got a focal point to focus on. Everything is to work towards your good. I mean, you don't know something and it's fine, or you do know something and you've got something to focus on. You've got something to work together towards.
Absolutely. And then one last thing before we close up is just, what are some more ways to have fun? I love the questions that you asked. Those were beautiful questions. And they even have like books of questions people can buy on Amazon if you're wondering, I don't know what questions to ask. So they have like lists of deep questions and stuff. But aside from that, what are other ways to bring fun into the relationship?
I'm bursting right now.
I love it.
A lover's bucket list is so important.
Okay.
Put the most ridiculous, mundane, risque things on there. You write it down and just keep going back to it and cross them off. Just keep going back to them. Bucket list, lover's bucket list.
Give me an example. Like, what would be on yours?
Oh my gosh, we did it the other day. We were tourists. We live in London, and we wanted to we've got a riverboat service. So we've got our red buses, and there's a riverboat. So it's an Uber boat basically. And we took that from one end of London to the other.
How fun.
And it was like we got to sit
That
with
was
each
just
other
during the school hours.
Literally dropped the boys off to school.
Run, when
and
did
it was
that,
like,
and then did the school run afterwards.
It was so lovely. We got all dressed up, and then the other end went for something to eat, and it was just so nice. And then sometimes it's like Meshach's got an obscure taste in film. He likes really old sort of swashbuckling films. And
yeah, the golden era of Hollywood. He loves the golden black era. And white movies.
And I love a rom-com. So it's like, okay, sit and watch this film that he likes.
Yeah.
So
and then there's the more provocative stuff like Truth or Dare.
Yeah.
Let's make it provocative. Let's make it sexy. Let's make it fun. Let's have a Truth or Dare moment. Now, people or folks may not be in that particular space in their relationship, and that's cool. Leave that for another time. But if you are in the space where there is that connection, where you're firing on all cylinders, or you've had a breakthrough, this is the time to now add that thing in to make it that bit more quote unquote spicy. So Truth or Dare, it could be a moderate or mild Truth or Dare, or it could be a bit more extreme. And it's about talking about fantasies as well. What are your fantasies, baby? Like, particularly if you've reestablished what your needs and desires are, let's really go there. We're in this for life together. We're on the same team. So at the very least, let's share what our fantasies are, even if we quote unquote can't act upon them. And that just adds a mystique and a provocativeness and an excitement to the relationship.
And we've got one more, because we've got a midnight menu, which is kind of a list of things you can do with your lover. We do blind dating. So we pretend we have everything about our lives is real. So our children, our friends, but we haven't met each other. So we either leave separately or together, and it's like we've just met. And
so this is a real life date night scenario.
We're
going on a date night. We're leaving the house
separately,
in separate directions, and we end up and good to see you. It's great to finally meet you. That kind of thing. We literally we role play this first date or this second date, and it's pretty fun.
You get to see who your lover is. You ask again loads of questions, and you see, is he worthy of another date, a second date? And it, at the end of the night, are you taking them home or not? So that's like blind dating in your sacred unions. Like,
do you play pretend roles for that, or do you go kind of like the honest answer, or do you make up different answers if on that date?
I think leave it to your discretion. You can do the real thing. I think at the end of the day, it's the principle is playfulness. Let's have fun with this. There's nothing stopping us from being playful and having fun. There's literally nothing stopping us other than our own quote unquote egotism.
Totally.
If you set the ego aside, actually, let's just enjoy ourselves.
Yeah, change your names, wear a wig. Go to somewhere, go to another part of town that you haven't explored yet. Change it all up.
Yeah. I love it. Oh my gosh. I got so much value from this discussion, as I'm sure our listeners did too. I wanted to hear a little bit more about the program that you guys are doing, and you have a scorecard and a free online quiz you wanted to offer our listeners. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, so it's called the 1% Love Scorecard Quiz. It is an assessment which ultimately tells you what the health of your relationship is. It is done within 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. It could be up to 15 minutes, but usually it will take a bit shorter. And it's based on 5 key areas. So you're answering 20 questions based on the 5 key areas. And at the end, you'll get your results, and it will show you which of the 5 zones you're in. So you'll either be at the foundational zone, or which is the first zone, all the way up to the 5th zone, which is sacred union of 1% love. And those results don't stop there. You then get 3 takeaways for each of the 5 key areas that you can immediately start to implement in your life. And then, our proprietary method is the 1% Lovers Transformation Method. So that's the 30-day pathway that our clients will come through. And from day 1 to day 30, we'll work on re-engineering their relationship so that it becomes a sacred union of 1% love.
How do you work with people? Is it one-on-one or in groups, or is it an online program? What's it like?
It's online. It's online. We do one-to-one sessions within the method.
Okay.
which are via Zoom. And then we have a pre-recorded virtual transformation program, which is a 30-day program. It has daily lessons and then daily love assignments. And then we also have a series of enhancement resources like the Midnight Menu that Annabel mentioned. We also have within the enhancement resources, we have over 10 hours of VIP group coaching that we recorded from a previous group coaching class. So that's what makes it up. And then we've got also some other exciting, not things that we don't even share about when people get on. It's more of a surprise. So, this is something to look out for and be excited for, you know.
Awesome.
So,
where can they find that quiz and more about your program?
Great question. Yeah. So thespoonerstate.com.
Yep.
The Spooner State is our handle on social media as well. So that's THEV Spooner 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 State STATE.com. That's got the scorecard quiz. You can click through, you can do the quiz, and then also it's got our method on there and how you can learn a bit more about our method as well.
Fantastic. I'll put in the show notes as well, so people can just click on it right there. And
Amazing.
it is just an honor and a privilege to meet the both of you. I'm very inspired. I'm feeling very enlivened and very positive. So I just love all these percolating ideas after speaking with you. So I just wanted to thank you so much for being on as a guest.
You're
No,
so
thank
welcome.
you.
It is a pleasure.
Such a pleasure. And just thank you for sharing your space and your wisdom with us. It's been so wonderful for us, Kelly. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. All right, everybody, let's go take that quiz right now. And we'll see you next time.
Love everyone.
Much love.
Bye.